สวัสดีชีวิตดีสวัสดีจากเพจแม่มดเทรดเดอร์เปลี่ยนเงินโลกมาเป็นเงินเราค่ะทุกคนค่ะนี่ก็คือความผันผวนนะคะเวลาที่คุณลุงพาวเวลหรือว่านะคะประธานธนาคารกลางนะคะออกมาอภิปรายหลังจากการประกาศดอกนะคะ
This jobs report we get on Friday that would look to you like equilibrium job growth?
You know, the main number you have to look at now is the unemployment rate, because if it's true that the demand for workers in the form of, let's call it, just say payroll jobs, that number has come down, but so has the break-even number, kind of in tandem. So, as long as that puts the labor market in balance, the fact that it's getting into balance due to declines in both supply and demand, though, I think it is suggestive of downside risk. So we of course will be watching that carefully.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the New York Times. Two of your colleagues called for a quarter-point cut today, and I'm wondering what aspects of their argument were most compelling to you and how you're weighing their views against those on the committee who, as of the June forecast, were in the camp of the Fed holding interest rates steady for the remainder of the year. And just in terms of the June SEP in particular, is that still the best representation of where the core of the committee is?
So on the dissents, what you want from everybody and also from a dissenter is a clear explanation of what your thinking is and what are the arguments you're making, and we had that today. So I think basically this was quite a good meeting all around the table where people were thought carefully about this and put their positions out there. As I mentioned, the sort of the majority of the committee was of the view that inflation's a bit above target, maximum employment is at target. That calls for modestly restrictive, in my way of thinking, modestly restrictive stance of policy for now. But we had two dissenters who I think, you want that clear thinking and expression of your thinking, and we certainly had that today, I think all around the table. In terms of, you asked about the June SEP, I wouldn't, you're right, that's what it says, and that may well, I couldn't point to it 6 weeks later as expressing people's thought. You really can't do that. We don't run an SEP, and I don't like to substitute in my own estimate of what the SEP might be. We don't have one. So I'll just say that, we haven't made any decisions about September. We'll be monitoring all the incoming data and asking ourselves whether the federal funds rate is in the right place.
And just on the point about policy being only modestly restrictive, does that mean that there's actually not much scope to reduce rates once the conditions for a cut are met, barring a significant weakening of the labor market?
So let me say, my own estimate is modestly restrictive, and there are a range of views of what the neutral rate is at this moment for our economy, and so others may say it's more restrictive or less restrictive even. We're going to be at some point, when we return to moving toward a more neutral stance, we'll be making that judgment as we go. I don't think we have a preset course. It's not so mechanical as saying, we've derived with great confidence the neutral rate and that is our destination, because really we understand that no one actually knows what the neutral rate is. We know it by its works, and that will be how the way the economy reacts over time to slightly looser policy.
Nick Timmeros, The Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, my question is about what have you learned over the last few months about the inflation generating and price pass-through process? And just to drill down, the June CPI report showed evidence of tariff-induced goods inflation. Now, the tariff landscape is only starting to be settled with some of these more recent deals. Given the lags between when tariffs are announced and when they show up in goods prices, is 2 months a long enough horizon to evaluate the impact and be confident that tariffs aren't impacting the broader inflation process?
I think you have to think of this as still quite early days. And so I think what we're seeing now is substantial amounts of tariff revenue being collected on the order of $30 billion a month, which is substantially higher than before. And the evidence seems to be mostly not paid only to a small extent through exporters lowering their price and companies or retailers, sort of people who are upstream, institutions that are upstream from the consumer, are paying most of this for now. Consumers it's starting to show up in consumer prices, as you know, in the June report. We expect to see more of that. And we know from surveys that companies feel that they have every intention of putting this through to the consumer, but the truth is they may not be able to in many cases. So I think we're just going to have to watch and learn empirically how much of this and over what period of time. I think we've learned that the process will probably be slower than expected at the beginning, but we never expected it to be fast. We think we have a long way to go to really understand exactly how it will be. So that's how we're thinking of it right now.
So if I could follow up, is the reticence to look through core goods inflation being driven by the judgment that during the pandemic expectations proved more adaptive than anyone at the Fed expected? Is it being driven by uncertainty over how restrictive policy is?
You could argue we are a bit looking through goods inflation by not raising rates. We haven't reacted to new inflation, but I mean, I wouldn't insist upon that. But I don't think, I think the base case, as I said, a reasonable base case is that these are one-time price effects. Of course, in the end, there will not be. This will not turn out to be inflation, because we'll make sure that it's not. We will, through our tools, make sure that this does not move from being a one-time price increase to serious inflation. We want to do that efficiently, though, and that means we want to do it. If you move too soon, you wind up maybe not getting inflation all the way fixed, and you have to come back. That's inefficient. If you move too late, you might do too unnecessary damage to the labor market. So there won't be, in the end, a big inflationary problem. What we're trying to do is accomplish that in a way that is efficient. But in the end, there should be no doubt that we will do what we need to do to keep inflation under control. Ideally, we do it efficiently.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Television and Radio. The one big bill, leaving aside the adjectives, do you expect it to add stimulus to the economy in 2026? And would that be an argument for remaining on hold or cutting back on the number of rate cuts you would expect for next year?
So, of course, let me just ritual disclaimer that we don't express any judgments or anything like that on fiscal legislation or other legislation for that matter. But I would say, when you think that, the biggest part of the bill was making permanent existing law on taxes, I don't think we see it as particularly stimulative. There should be some stimulative effect, but it shouldn't be significant over the next couple of years.
And to follow up, what do you, well, I don't want to put this in terms of you and the president, so let me ask it this way. Do you have concerns about the cost to the government of keeping rates elevated for longer in terms of interest rate charges?
Yeah, no, that's, we have a mandate, and that's maximum employment and price stability. And it is, it's not something we do to consider the cost to the government of our rate changes. We have to be able to look at the goal variables Congress